One of the biggest questions I saw coming up when I talked about Marvel Rivals the other day was, could DC do the same? Could DC have their own Marvel Rivals type game, and what would it be like? And I wanted to take a look at that for just a couple of minutes, hypothetically, as an idea man. Obviously, I'm not a video game designer. Am I someone who's played video games my entire life? Yeah. But people don't like idea men. Studios don't like idea people who, and I quote, don't know how to code. Game devs get very mad about that. But I will say that I think anyone can have good ideas, no matter what they are. You could be a plumber, you could have a great idea for a video game. And when it comes down to it, Marvel Rivals, I think, is a very fun game. I understand it's going to be not everybody's cup of tea, especially with the always online stuff, something that in a lot of games I'm not a fan of. But that said, I think it takes the ideas of a team-based shooter like Overwatch or Team Fortress 2 or a handful of other games, and it does it well. It does it, I would say, better than games like Concord that crashed and burned at launch. So I want to establish that first. Marvel Rivals is not original in the idea of being the first team-based shooter. I don't think you have to be the first, though, to be good. Now, that said, when it comes down to it, Marvel and DC have a very, very long history of not so subtly copying or being inspired by each other. Which also leads us to the question of not only could DC do it, could there be a Marvel Rivals type game for DC? A DC Rivals, you would never call it that, but could that exist? But also, should it? Would it actually be a good idea? Would this benefit these characters? Would it benefit their audience? Or would it just lead to DC facing heavy criticism for copying Marvel once again? Something that they very clearly tried to do by rushing the DC Extended Universe, the old DCEU, to try and catch up with the MCU. Is that a good idea? I leave those kind of to you as the question of the day, but it's something I want to look at here because I personally think that in terms of repertoire of characters, they could do it. There are definitely there's a huge repertoire of DC characters. You have obviously the Justice League, the Justice Society, the Legion of Doom. You have all of these major and minor villains, major and minor heroes. People think of the staples like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, but you even have lesser known characters as well. You know, Booster Gold. I'm not saying he's not known by anybody, but he's certainly a character that I wouldn't put on a tier as Batman. But I could certainly see Booster Gold working in this game similarly to how Star-Lord works. You know, he wouldn't play the exact same, but when you have a character like Star-Lord, I could see a character like Booster Gold working. When you have a character like the Hulk, who's very clearly been scaled down in power so that he doesn't just punch someone once and their head comes flying off, so of course he can play in this game, right? I could see someone like Superman working the same way. And even if you want an in-universe explanation, they're pulling their punches. And when you're looking at it too, you know, with Marvel, obviously the Hulk and Superman are not the same, but my point is that they're both extremely powerful, right? Yet they still work. A character like Spider-Man, who in the comics is known to pull his punches all the time. He still works. I mean, remember that comic book where Spider-Man thought Wolverine was behind him, so he punched somebody and killed a woman? Yeah, a lot of people like to forget about that, but that was a thing, right? When you actually look at how strong Spider-Man is, if he wanted to, he could be an absolute menace. But he doesn't go around Marvel Rivals beheading all of his competition, right? He doesn't just go around and punch off Black Widow's face. He's obviously scaled to fit the game. The same way that Doctor Strange is not going to try and end the known universe with magic just because he's competing in Marvel Rivals. But that said, there are plenty of characters that I think in terms of that, I would say, arsenal of characters that would work. Now, like I said, DC and Marvel were known for being heavily inspired by each other, and at the end of the day, they're also heavily inspired by old myths. They're inspired by stories of gods and heroes and all of these different things. They go all the way back. I would say one of the earliest recorded ones that I can think of is the Epic of Gilgamesh. You know, you go all the way back and you have stories inspiring stories inspiring stories. That said, I do think that DC, even though they could do it with their characters, would be, first off, hard-pressed to find developers within their own umbrella that could do it. Now, does that mean that the folks at Rocksteady or WB Games who are doing what they're told from the people above them, that those people are idiots? No. But what I mean is the management of a lot of these companies have been dropping the ball for quite a while. You even look at how Injustice was handled, And Injustice is something where you have this huge crossover with all of these DC characters from a renowned studio, from basically the makers of Mortal Kombat, NetherRealm. And even that, there's a lot of people who didn't connect with it, right? There's a lot of people who weren't fans of it. I liked it, but it's true. And, their specialty is fighting games. So I wouldn't put them on a team-based shooter. And the reason I use that example is because we've seen what happens when development teams, because of their management, stray too far away from what they're good at. Some examples of that would be things like Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Some examples of that would be things like Gotham Knights. To a different extent, I think Gotham Knights is a much more competent video game and story than Suicide Squad. It's just not super memorable. Speaking of which, I played through both of these games entirely over on my Let's Play channel, so if you want to check that out, the link will be in the description down below. So they could do it with characters. You look at a character like Hawkeye, and it's not hard to say that maybe Green Arrow could show up and play similarly. You look at a character like Doctor Strange, and it's not a stretch to say maybe Dr. Fate could play kind of similarly if he showed up, right? I think that those are ideas that work. And obviously the main staples, like we said, they're ideas that work. But who could implement them first off? I don't really think the current developers with WB could. Something that Marvel has done a very good job of is licensing out their things or bringing in external teams to make something. I think it's one reason why Marvel Rivals works, because they didn't say, let's force it on anyone under the Marvel banner. They gave it to people who understood the assignment. They gave it to people who could make a game like this, even though they weren't under the Marvel threshold. And I think that that's something that DC, honestly, and WB have completely flopped on doing in recent years, like in the last 10 years. They've been very focused on just in-house stuff. And I think that that can work. I think it works very well for companies like Nintendo, but it works very well for companies like Nintendo because they also have a very, very large network of second-party studios that they're connected to, but they also have so many studios and things that are just directly under them that they own that specialize in different things. I don't think WB has that. I think that they have the guys who were good at Arkham in terms of what they knew how to do, in terms of what they were known for doing for their management. They had the people who were good at, this is going to sound mean, copying Arkham City, because I thought that Arkham Origins was great, but it's built on the back of that game, right? Its infrastructure, its graphical interface, the way it works, everything, it's built on the back of it. And they have the people very clearly connected to them who are good at Mortal Kombat, who are good at fighting games. These aren't the kind of people that I would necessarily say, hey, one of you groups should go make a team-based shooter. I think one of the reasons we ended up with Suicide Squad is because of that idea. Because of, yeah, you guys are good at this. Now do something totally unrelated, no warm-up, nothing. You're going from 0 to 100 on a different genre. I think that's difficult. I understand that Rocksteady was able to do that with Arkham Asylum, but it was also able to do it when the genre wasn't tired. Like, people weren't tired of single-player superhero games, and also a lot of them to that point had not been well ironed out and well crafted. So, there was a niche there to fill. People were tired of these huge live service games, these Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League type games. And what's interesting about that is that's one reason why Concord failed, is because there's plenty of team-based shooters that if you bring nothing special or new to the table, who's going to connect with it? And this is where I think we get to the problem of DC doing this kind of thing. Even if they could find developers who wanted to make them a team-based shooter like Marvel Rivals, a team-based game like that, outside of their company, and even though they do have the characters to do it, I truly feel like this would be another example of copying. And one thing we've seen from the DC universe, from the DC media side of it, with James Gunn and Peter Safran, is they seem to be very hesitant to, I want to say, revisit certain old ideas because they feel like it's copying. And if you don't believe me, you can look at James Gunn's response to when people wanted to bring back the DC animated universe, when they were like, hey, what about a Justice League Unlimited revival? And Gunn basically said, and I disagree with him on this, but that's just my opinion. He said, essentially, that the reason it worked for Marvel was because they weren't chasing a trend. Now, my thing is, I kind of disagree there because reboots and relaunches of things had been a trend for quite a while. We're still seeing it. Frasier came back. We saw things like the Roseanne show come back. We saw Fuller House. It's like bringing back that nostalgia trip of that old thing. I think it has been a trend for a while, so I kind of disagree. I think the reason reviving the X-Men show worked is because it was so well crafted and made with love, and it was written well. Now, that said, I think that they are hesitant to be perceived as trying to copy Marvel, trying to copy Marvel's success, especially with Gunn's connection in the past to Marvel. Like, I don't think he wants to come in and look like the guy who's just copying Marvel. I think that that's not like the foot he wants to put forward. So it's one of those things for me where I'm thinking, okay, well, on the media side, I'm not even sure if they would want to visit that. But also on the fan side, I can absolutely see them getting massacred if they came out with DC rivals. Maybe they call it like DC champions, DC nemesis, DC guys who fight each other. I don't know. I'm not a title guy. It takes me quite a while to come up with them for these videos, and they're still not great. Now, that said, even if they made that game, I could absolutely see people being like, oh, they're just copying Marvel. And that's something that people noticed with the DCEU. As different as the DCEU was from the MCU, it was very, very clear that they were trying to do it very quickly. Like, they pushed, and I know a lot of people don't like Zack Snyder, and you're free to not like him, but a lot of people pushed, behind the scenes, executives reportedly were pushing for a Justice League movie to catch the Avengers. Like, they didn't want to do all these movies building up to it. They wanted to just get to the Avengers right now. They saw that paycheck from the MCU. They saw the money that was rolling into Marvel and Disney, and they're like, now hold on, wait a minute, we want that. But they didn't want to take the time to build to it. And I think that that's a big problem DC has had. And I think that's a big problem copying Marvel rivals would bring, is you're not actually bringing a new idea to the table. You're just copying it with characters that we like. Now, would some DC fans connect with that and eat it up? And could it be a good game? Absolutely. I bet there's some people who really don't care for the Marvel Comics characters who would play that game and don't even have an interest in Marvel rivals. And I totally respect that and understand. And to be a complete honest shill and sellout, I'd play the game too. Because I love these characters. You tell me Marvel rivals with some of my favorite DC Comics characters? I'm already in. I'm sold. That's an idea I would support. But that said, you have these problems. You have the problem of who would make it. You have the problem of being perceived as copying on the executive side. You have the problem of being perceived as copying on the fandom side, something that DC has already been really kind of crucified for over the years and is trying to rebuild its reputation on. Even when you got movies like Shazam, one of the first comments I saw about it was, oh, this just feels like a Marvel film. Oh, this just feels like it's trying to be an MCU film. So DC has to be able to find its own identity. And you can see this too with why Concord failed. I don't think it had an identity. Like, yes, you had things like ugly character designs. Yes, you had things like developers on Twitter calling critics of the game talentless freaks. These things did not help. I think that they were very pathetic displays of a lack of talent on the part of some of the people in charge of the project, not maybe people who worked hard under them, but the people at the top. But that said, the reason a game like Concord fails and a game like Marvel succeeds is not just because of its branding. I've seen that critique too. But if you want to see where that critique leads, look no further than the movie theater. There have been several Marvel films that have pretty much failed in recent years, or at the very least been mid in terms of their returns. They're not widely successful. There have been a lot of DC movies that have faced the same problem. Now, those are two of the biggest entertainment brands in the world, Marvel and DC, and they're not able to only float by based off of name. You can also see this from games that shut down or don't go anywhere. Yes, DC's Suicide Squad is not a huge name, but the Justice League is. You're putting Batman in there, you're putting the Justice League in there, and that game still doesn't do well. That tells me that branding only isn't going to float your game. And that's where I think you really do have a problem. Let's say you introduce this game now into the market and you have Marvel rivals and DC rivals. What does DC bring to the table that's new, that's unique, that's interesting about this genre? And that's where I think this genre is of these online games. There's so many of them that if you don't bring something very unique and new to the table that will grab the attention of people, not just Spider-Man being in the game, It doesn't work that way. Midnight Suns showed us it didn't work that way from its marketing and people not supporting it. Guardians of the Galaxy, great game. People didn't support it. The marketing couldn't carry it. You look at it and you have a lot of problems with DC trying to just follow suit on what Marvel did here. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'm very, very interested to hear your thoughts. Answer the question of the day. If you want to check out some of the different things I've done, we have other channels. We have channels like JayRPG where I cover RPGs. We have my Let's Play channel. We have my wife's channel I'm on where we talk about anime. But also we have our own store, CosmoBunny.shop, where you can use code DJAY123 for 10% off your first purchase over there. Coasters, keychains, trays, and more, handmade from recycled paper. We don't print pictures. What we do is we take books that are damaged, unable to be sold by local stores, and we turn them into new transformative art for your home, and then we actually recycle the rest. We also have a Fortnite code. So lots of fun stuff. Have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay shway.